today.
And we welcome you to the New York studios, a shot of the Brooklyn Bridge area if you are watching on the AFA channel, and it is fogged and snowed out. That's what we're dealing with today. Kevin McCullough welcoming you to another edition of this midday look at what goes on, and then also giving you some perspective on it as we work through the hour. By the way, tomorrow, programming note, the National March for Life is going on. We anticipate having some live reports from the march. It'll be interesting to see if the weather on the East Coast douses any of the exuberance that may normally be expressed at the March for Life, the Support for Life, the most pro-life event, one of the biggest events in the nation's capital each year. But today we've got a very interesting story. Brent, did you say the video is ready? Okay. I've got a special guest. I'll introduce him in a second, but I want you to be, at least on a cursory level, aware a little bit about the background of what we're going to discuss before we discuss it. And in the Chicago area, recently, there was a report of a back and forth between a governor and a group of people that live throughout the state. And I really think that there's a lot of moral ramifications to what this case is all about, but it's wound its way to the Supreme Court, and so it's really important that we get the facts right. So let's start with the videotape. This was from ABC 7 recently in the Chicago area. Take a look.
Oh, for lunch? Sure.
Every night I pray, God, let me live one more day than Josh.
25-year-old Josh Harris has Rubenstein-Taebe syndrome, compounded by physical disabilities and mental illness. His family is in the Illinois Home-Based Support Services program, which allows disabled adults to live in their homes. The state and federal governments pay home health care workers a monthly stipend far less than what an institution costs, and Josh is able to live at home.
Eats.
January 2009, Governor Quinn signs an executive order stating home caregivers, even moms and dads, are public employees, available to be unionized by Illinois Service Employees International. Those who don't want to join the union will still have to pay for representation on collective bargaining issues.
We're talking about unionizing family members, parents in a home. For me, that is inconsistent and it's intrusive. And I believe it will interfere in Josh's care.
She and other disability program members voted the union down and sued Quinn, a class action lawsuit that will be heard here at the U.S. Supreme Court on Tuesday. If the court rules Quinn was wrong in declaring home care providers public employees, unions could lose several 100,000 members across the country. Flora Johnson is a union officer and a mother who cares for her 47-year-old disabled son, Kenneth, under a similar state program.
We can't just be walking around with little flimsy arms.
No,
We gotta work at it. We can have a voice with SEIU, negotiate, have health care insurance, which we had never had before. I would say the union is a God-sent blessing.
Suburban State Representative Jim Durkin says if home care providers don't want to unionize, they shouldn't have to. And tonight, the ABC 7i team has learned Durkin has filed this resolution that would accomplish that.
I think that the message has been sent that this is not a place for this type of program, that government should stay out of it.
During his political career, Quinn has taken nearly $5 million in campaign contributions from the Service Employees Union.
A couple of weeks after the executive order was signed and the union campaign began, there was Governor Quinn on TV with the SEIU banner behind him, surrounded by the SEIU leadership. And I couldn't help but to think if maybe this was an exchange, a deal.
But Johnson disagrees and thinks Quinn's actions help workers.
Since SEIU has been involved, we have really made tremendous progress having a stable workforce for the people with disabilities, seniors, and people with medical disorders.
The governor and the state attorney general declined TV interviews prior to next week's oral arguments in Washington. The governor's Illinois brief contends Pam Harris and the others jumped the gun and shouldn't even be able to file a lawsuit until their group is unionized and pays dues. So we'll be following this next week.
All right. So that's the report as it aired on ABC 7 late last week. And I'm bringing into the conversation now Ed Morrissey, who is one of the senior editors at hotair.com. And Ed, first of all, welcome. Glad to have you with us today.
Well, thanks for having me on, Kevin. It's great talking with you.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the facts of the case. What they're basically saying is that if you are an at-home healthcare provider, so you're a parent, you're a guardian, you're someone else, a friend of the family, whatever, but you're tasked with being in home caring for someone with disabilities. The governor came along and said, you're a public employee if you receive any state stipend or any monies from the government. Therefore, you're a public employee. Therefore, the SEIU, the unions, have the opportunity to unionize you and to try to, I don't know of a kinder word for it, extort dues from you if you have no desire to be part of that. Am I getting any of this wrong so far?
No, so far you're exactly correct, and this is not the first time that this has come up, because it's come up in the state of Minnesota as well, where I live. The governor here, Mark Dayton, in 2011, tried to do the same thing with daycare workers, people who actually work out of their home, providing daycare to their own children as well as other children who aren't in a state daycare facility, so to speak. Not in a state-run daycare facility, but just doing it from their homes. And if any of the people that they were watching were on public assistance of any sort, Medicaid being one of those things, or family support, then Dayton, by executive order, tried to say, well, then you are a public employee and you have to join the union. And they set up the vote in a way that people who are already in the union overwhelmingly participate in this, and so therefore the unionization is pretty much pro forma. A judge smacked that down because he did it by executive order, which is the same way that Quinn did it in Illinois. But then last year, the legislature passed it, and I believe it's in force now. I'm not sure if it's being challenged here in Minnesota, but this case would directly impact that one as well as some other states that do the same thing.
Sure. So what are the arguments being made at the Supreme Court level today?
Well, I think that the arguments that are going to be made at the Supreme Court level, first off, I think they're going to be challenged very, very heavily on how somebody can become involuntarily a public employee, that enter into an employee relationship with the state involuntarily on the basis of just receiving public assistance funds. And this is a big issue. It's bigger than folks that are providing daycare to their family members or extended health care, 24-hour type care to family members, because under that definition, Kevin, all sorts of people end up being employees of the state. Doctors who accept Medicaid payments technically could fall under the same rubric. It is a very strange and very, very dangerous definition to put in place, and it has at least the potential of basically taking over large portions of the economy based on aid payments.
Well, and let's cut to the chase. Is that what the unions ultimately hope to accomplish? Is this really an accumulation of more power and money in their pockets by this forced unionization of the public?
Yeah, this is obviously what they want. The problem with the union movement, the labor movement, is that the private sector is basically disappearing on them. The only area for growth right now for them is the public sector, and they pretty much saturated that market. So now what they're trying to do is they're trying to expand the definition of what is a public sector employee so that they have more people to get dues from. And here in Minnesota, it's not an insubstantial number. I believe the number that was being tossed around was somewhere around 11,000 people would suddenly have to start paying dues. And, of course, the unions use that for political purposes, and those purposes usually benefit one party, which is the Democrats.
And oftentimes violate the people's conscience that they're extorting the dues from.
And this is another point, too, because one of the things that this might end up tripping over is a decision called Abood, which was from several years ago, actually from quite a while ago, where people who were in unions were told that they had to pay enough dues to cover the collective bargaining costs that the union provides them. Even if they didn't want to join the union themselves, if they were in union workplaces, they had to pay those dues. And that was because the unions had to be compensated for their collective bargaining efforts. This may end up having the Supreme Court take another look at Abood, because there's lots of things wrong with Abood. And if that's the case, you might end up with a situation where not only does this get overturned, but so does Abood, and suddenly every public, and this is limited to the public employee unions, the public sector unions, all of a sudden every public employee is free to choose whether or not to pay dues, which is what happened in Wisconsin, what happened in Michigan, and that may be a real disaster for the unions. So they may end up with the biggest backfire of their lives on this case, potentially.
Well,
it's sort of a long shot, but potentially.
And isn't it interesting that it's the union's overreach through executive action and through pressure and through graft and corruption at the gubernatorial level in 2 states that ends up coming back to bite them and say, it could be. I mean, if you think the public sector had the option of paying dues or not paying dues and joining the union or not joining the union, we're told from the unions that it would be no different, that they would truly choose and that they're truly providing the service that is invaluable to the employees. If you talk to the employees, particularly teachers across the country that are part of these unions that don't, by and large, want to be part of them, I think that you put some of the unions out of business overnight.
Well, yes, and that's what you saw in Wisconsin when they did the PEU reform that Governor Walker pushed through. It was that about 20% of the public sector unions decertified because they have to recertify every single year, which means that the unions are held accountable for whatever benefit that they're giving to their membership, or they lose their affiliation. And one other point that we should make too about the Harris versus Quinn case, and also with the daycare workers here in Minnesota, is that those funds, those dues, are taken out of the Medicaid payment, and so what you're doing is actually reducing the amount of money for the care for that individual while providing no benefit whatsoever. There's no benefit that comes from being in the union because all of these Medicaid disbursements are not negotiable. They're not. The union isn't going to be able to negotiate with some bureaucrat someplace in the state government agency and try to get more money out of them. Those things are set by law. So there's really no point to the representation. It is really just a way to suck money from the care of disabled individuals, and as it is in Illinois.
Well, and that's where I think this becomes so insidious. Now, I'm the father of a disabled son who's a grown adult and quite self-sufficient now, but when I think about these families that are being exploited for no tangible benefit for their household, for no tangible benefit to the care of their loved one, for no tangible benefit to the income earner for the household that cares for the loved one. This is just money leaving that household, not money coming back to it. This is really insidious. And this is the kind of thing that I think, if we don't call them on the carpet, this is the kind of stuff that I think unions would love to get away with more and more and more as their private sector market has dried up. And, eventually President Obama is not going to be in the White House at some point in time, and someone's going to come along and probably do some reform on the federal front as well. So we probably have a reduction of federal workforce at some point in time. They are running for their lives. They are scared. But I have been irritated with unions for years. This is kind of the final straw for me. You want to harm disabled people by extorting them for union dues. That says a lot about your character.
I totally agree, Kevin, and it really shows you how like you said, insidious, how corrosive the labor movement has become when it married into the public sector. That is really
Ed Morrissey, hotair.com, senior editor. Hold on, let me come right back with you after this break. This is AFA Today on AFR Talk. This story found at hotair.com with Ed's byline, but we'll link it to the Facebook page, afatoday.com as well. Coming right back. Stay with us.